Hello, you weirdos. Jim here, and welcome back to the Weird Science Comics YouTube channel, where I have breaking rumors/news. It's a rumor till it's news. It will be news, I'm pretty sure. I was told by my quote-unquote source, because I'm fancy, that Mark Millar will be going back to Marvel Comics. It'll be announced either today, as I'm recording, Wednesday, or Thursday, tomorrow, as I'm recording. And it's going to be what he said, something bigger than a civil war. So we can all discuss that before you start yelling if you hate Mark Millar, or you love him, or whatever. The idea that I'd want to know from everybody is, what do you think he's going to write? And then possibly what you would want him to write. And that would be kind of cool. I'd like to see what people think. I am a Mark Millar fan, but I'm willing to talk to people who aren't, even though this week in a weird play, not really weird for me, gotten fights with some people about Mark Millar, in particular, more his Ultimates book from back in the day. But that, I think, even kind of comes into play here as we go. I'll tell you by the end what I think he is writing. But in the meantime, this has been in the works for a bit. If you're not aware, Mark Millar ended up kind of, calling out a lot of writers as big as him and said, hey, all you big writers like me, why don't we go back to the big two? The big two struggling. The hype isn't there. We need to get comics back in the deal. We need to get them hyped up. And in that, in a selfish take, he is saying that with the big two down, that is also means that indie stuff is down. And people have argued this with me here on the YouTube channel a lot. And the idea that they hate DC and Marvel. I get it. Everybody can hate or love what they want, but they hate DC and Marvel and they want it burned down. I hope that they burn it down. Oh my God, this and that, slogans being thrown all around. And then I say, well, the problem is if they get burned down, the whole comic industry goes down. And they seem to think that what I'm saying is that indie books stink. I'm not. We have our end of year list. Everybody's going to do end of year videos and all that stuff. I'll tell you that when I started getting my notes together, I don't even think I have a big two book in my top 10. That's bad. I mean, that is bad. And it's amazing for me because that's never happened. I am more of a DC guy, and then I'm a Marvel guy, then an indie guy. But there's so many strong indie books. But what happens is, and I know that my man Sus Gabe has even gone and talked to Jason Fabach about this on Twitter. The idea that the Ghost Machine books are great. Rook Exodus is an awesome, awesome book that not a lot of people know about. And I think most people watching this, you're more in the know. You're smart, right? So you know about it. But the problem is that Ghost Machine is not doing a lot of their own sort of publicity, so people don't know. So if the big two go down, that goes down because most people start by reading Batman, Spider-Man, characters they know. Then when they get familiar, and also I'll tell you, being a guy who didn't start reading comics till about 15 years ago, it's intimidating. And I wasn't a young whippersnapper then. It's intimidating trying to figure out things. And I'm saying intimidating just because of the massive amount, but it's also intimidating to ask questions, especially now. Everybody's fighting. These fights that go on in comicdom, you're scared. So you need to just grab on first to something you know, and it would be a Batman, Spider-Man, Superman, all those. You could name the characters. You know what I'm talking about. But then all of a sudden you get through that and you're like, oh yeah, this Rook Exodus. Oh my God. Oh, Transformers. Oh, cool. And so you grab all these other things, which are the stronger books right now. But what Mark Millar's saying is, let's get the big two to that point as well. So everything's hitting. And he did this. He came out, he tweeted it out. And the thing is, it seemed like an olive branch that he was extending. And a lot of times what happens with these things, you don't think it through fully. So you end up thinking that you're going to be welcomed back with open arms. Everybody's going to kiss and hug you, give you, flowers. But what happens is when you tell people who are doing a job that they're doing a shitty job and you're going to swoop in and save them, they kind of clap back. They fight back. And that's what happened. And also shills fought back too. Oh, comics aren't in trouble. The big two are doing great. Here's the spoiler alert here. They're not. They haven't been for quite some time. That idea of the fight between comics are doing great. No, they're not. They're not. And with that, you used to throw these numbers out and you hear them going real quiet at the end of year numbers are down. And Mark Millar just is saying, let's go. Now, the other thing that I think that he doesn't end up kind of thinking through is a lot of these writers that he's pointing out, hey, we should go back. They didn't leave Marvel or DC. They were forced out. Some of these writers were just kicked out. They were kicked to the curb. And so they're mad about that. They don't want to do, but also the idea you're doing your own thing. You're making your own money. You're able to write whatever you want with your characters you create. That is a big incentive to write indie stuff as opposed to writing a character like Batman. That's great. He's big and all, but you do kind of have to take a hit because you don't own the character. And then they do a movie. Basically, you get nothing. I mean, how many stories have we seen where people aren't even invited to a premiere or something because there's not enough seats because these TikTok, Twitch, people are doing their twerking and stuff there. In the theater, they're doing it. But the idea, again, did people want to go back? But people fought back. And in fact, Mark Millar ended up at one point announcing that he was going to be on a Superman book at the end of 2025. And then suddenly he wasn't going to be on a Superman book at the end of 2025. And then even came out and said, I'm just going to wait until it's public domain and I'll write the story I want to write. So I think that they ended up kind of telling him, no, you can't do that. You can't do this, whatever. And he said, screw you. I'm trying to help you. I'm trying to help you out. He doesn't need it. And that's where I think that with that, you have to keep in mind, even if you don't like him, he doesn't need to go back to Marvel. He doesn't need it at all. He's doing it still in my mind as that way to try to save comics, to try to get them hyped up. And I don't think that if you sat him down, he would sit there and say, I don't know. He gets a little big, but the idea of I'm going to save comics, he's just going to try to do his part. And maybe this ends up, well, Mark Millar went, oh, that's cool. Maybe how this is even looked at, how this is welcome. Maybe we'll get other people involved because when a lot of books come up and a lot of things go down at DC and Marvel, people are like, oh man, why did they get this person? Why don't they get somebody better? There aren't a lot of people better that can or will work at the big two. There's just not a lot of great new writers. And again, if somebody ends up saying in the comments, they can say whatever they want. But if you get the idea of, oh, I don't need this old hack coming back, or I don't need this, what's the alternative? What are you going to get instead of him to make something big, to make something hyped up to a point where I think that this will be bigger news than just comic news that we're used to seeing, a couple tweets or a video, whatnot. I think that this will hit a bit mainstream. This is big. This is a bigger bit, a little bigger than, say, Dan Slott on the Superman stuff over. And just think of that. The idea that Mark Millar announces, I'm going to be on a Superman book. I'm going to do this. I always thought that it was going to be something like a Black Label, Vertigo, if they end up doing that. But, an Elseworlds thing, maybe a continuation of something, whatever it would be. But the idea that you get that pushed aside and instead we get Dan Slott, hopefully for only 3 issues, but that didn't make as much hype as it is. But still, that's something. I would love to know, again, what everybody thinks. I think that it will be the Ultimates universe. I do think that it'll be an end of year Maker coming back event. I hope that it isn't something, because in the Ultimate universe, it does seem like it's primed to have a registration act. You don't have superheroes, the powers, all that. All of a sudden they come back. I don't think Mark Millar would do that. Just replay something of the Ultimate Civil War. We'll see. But just to point out, we are still wondering who's going to be the next Amazing Spider-Man writer. There's a lot of other books that, aren't out, or you could think of something going on that he could be on other things as well. But I've been told that it seems like it's going to be this big Ultimate Universe thing. But that is it. Let me know what you think. Sorry for the scattered deal. That's just my thing. I know there'll be somebody who's like, oh, you were so scattered, things like that. I just want to tell them right now, thank you. Thank you for reminding me of the hell that is my life. I always need that. So with all that, thanks. Check the show notes for things like our Patreon, where you can get more and more comic shows. We have a bunch of reading clubs. We have a ton of indie, Marvel, DC, and manga shows that you can check out. And you can get a free 7-day free trial if you go and sign up right now and check out before you have to pay all that. But check all the other things as well. But thanks, everybody, and I'll talk to you later.
You are all weirdos.
Weird science is the revolution. Weird science is the revolution.